Okay, good afternoon. One last time. So today we're looking at schizophrenia and how phenomena of schizophrenia connect to the themes we've been discussing about imaginative understanding and functionalism and things like that. The reading for next time, well actually there isn't any reading for next time. Right. Okay, there isn't any next time. So today we're going to start out with one last look at one of our theme slides for the class. This thing from Jasper's about the difference between imaginative understanding and scientific explanation. Understanding genetically by empathy, how one psychic event emerges from another, as opposed to finding by repeated experience that a number of phenomena are regularly linked together, the scientific approach. And one last time at our old friend the bat, and the possibility of having a complete scientific explanation of what's going on with the bat without having any imaginative understanding of the bat at all, and therefore without having any understanding of its conscious life. So that makes it sound as if with other humans, we should be able to have an imaginative understanding of one another's conscious lives. Of course, now and then we don't manage it, but it should in principle be possible. But Jasper says there's an important category of psychiatric phenomena that are just outside the reach of imaginative understanding. You can only have an objective or scientific explanation of these. He says the delusions, such as the delusions of schizophrenic patients, are ununderstandable. You can't get any imaginative understanding of what's going on in there. So I'm going to focus on one particular type of delusion. Here's one case. A 22-year-old woman had the delusion that thoughts and feelings emanating from her mother's unconscious were being carried in raindrops that fell on her air conditioner. When the raindrops hit the air conditioner, they made a noise, and simultaneously these thoughts and feelings merged with her own illness, with her own unconscious. This merging had resulted in her own mental illness. Now, sometimes, as we'll see in a moment, sometimes with a schizophrenic patient, what you're reading is not something you want to take too seriously. It's a kind of disordered process that's going on. But the thing about this kind of report is that you get it again and again from schizophrenic patients. It's one of the classical first-rank symptoms of schizophrenia. That is, if you report this to your physician, that is specifically diagnostic for schizophrenia. A 29-year-old housewife said, "I look out of the window and I think the garden looks nice and the grass looks cool. But the thoughts of Eamon Andrews," Eamon Andrews was a particularly cheesy 1970s TV chat show host in Britain. Why Eamon Andrews? Anyway, the thoughts of Eamon Andrews come into my mind. There are no other thoughts there, only his. He treats my mind like a screen and flashes his thoughts onto it like you flash a picture. So the general phenomenon here is patients are feeling that the thoughts that occur in their heads are not actually their own. So it's not as if, like when we're having these little chats, you and I try and communicate thoughts to one another. You know, I tell you how things are, and you point out that the whole thing is full of mistakes, and that was a quantifier fallacy, and it didn't really work anyhow, and so on. So we exchange thoughts the whole time. But that's not what these patients feel is happening. It's not ordinary communication. What they feel is that a particular concrete thought that originated in another mind is being shoved into their mind. It is as if another's thoughts have been engendered or inserted in them. One of our patients reported physically feeling the alien thoughts as they entered his head and claimed he could pinpoint the point of entry. Thoughts are put into my head like, kill God. It's just like my mind working, but it isn't. They come from this chap, Chris. They are his thoughts. So this is a very scary phenomenon for the people who experience it. A 23-year-old patient reported, I cry, tears roll down my cheeks, and I look unhappy. But inside I have a cold anger because they are using me in this way. And it's not me who's unhappy, but they who are projecting it, unhappiness, onto my brain. They project upon me laughter for no reason. And you have no idea how terrible it is to laugh and look happy. I know it is not your, but their reaction. So this happens again and again with these patients. They are trying to describe what is happening to them. So my first question is, what could be happening to you? I mean, suppose you were given a description of what was happening to you. What could be happening to you where you'd say, well, of course, as that was what was happening to you, you'd have that experience of alien thoughts being pushed into your head. What could be doing that? Do you have any thoughts? And this is really what it feels like. We have to take these reports seriously. Anyone? One, two. Yeah. A mechanism in your mind? There's a mechanism in your mind that identifies your thoughts as coming from yourself? Yeah. And it's not working. Yeah, if you're going to give a scientific explanation here, it would have to be something like that, wouldn't it? But how would that work? There are all the thoughts coming along on a conveyor belt or something, and they're each getting stamped. Hey, that's one of mine, that's one of mine, that's one of mine. Yeah, now the stamper doesn't work. Yep. It's really a bit weird that, right? Because why would you have a stamper like that? I mean, do you see what I mean? Otherwise what? Well, yes, but what I mean is, what conveyor belt is this stamper working on? It's a conveyor belt of the thoughts being generated in here, right? So none of your thoughts are actually getting in here. So why do I need some alert to tell me that they're mine and not yours? It would be different if I had a belt going along with lots of thoughts coming from different people. And then, oh yeah, that's one of mine, that's one of mine, that's not one of mine. Yeah, you see what I mean? The stamping mechanism is really kind of strange. I agree that's what he says, you're right. And of course, in a more abstract way, you must be right. There's something like that must be going on. But in a way that, although you must be right, that description only increases your puzzlement as to what's happening here. Yep. Yeah. Yes, that's right. So you would just have that as the delusion. Yeah. I think the reason I gave these descriptions at such length is that it's not just that they have this theory that this is what's going on. This is what it almost physically feels like. You see what I mean? It's not just a crazy idea that they have. They're trying to report what they feel is happening to them. And it's more, how should I say, visceral than just some idea they've got into their head. You know, the way you might get an idea into your head, like, I'm really good at lecturing or something, and you just get this idea in your head and you just do it, you just go along with it. That's not what this seems like. You know, if you think about these things I just read out, It's more like this is what it feels like is happening to me. Yeah. It's not all the time. It's in phases. Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, it's this visceral feeling that is jolting them into the other reality. Because that's one of the things that is so destabilizing about this. I once watched an interview with a patient saying that her neighbor was doing this stuff. Sometimes when she was at a party, she said, my neighbor, he's a horrible man. He will put these awful thoughts into my head. And she was quite puzzled. She said, I didn't know people could do that. And the thing is, once you've got it, that can really happen. People can do that. I didn't know about it. What kind of world are you living in? You see what I mean? So much of what you think is wrong, that it's so deeply destabilizing. Yeah. I talked to a psychiatrist I was with. I said, she's so sensible and matter-of-fact about this. But why doesn't she go to the police if she thinks, something like that is really happening? And he said she just doesn't live in that world anymore where you could go to the police about things. Everything's being turned on its head because of this. Yeah. In their head. Yeah, but the thing I would emphasize is they're not just making it up. I mean, these are perfectly sensible people who are being pushed into this by what they're encountering. You see what I mean? So it's not like the thing I would want to get away from. It's not like they're just cooking it up. Yeah. Anything else on that? Yeah.
I was just thinking about what kinds of
Yes, right. Yes, right, yeah. You made me say that.
You come to this conclusion on your own, by
yes.
your will, but in some way you've got this suspicion that they planned for you to be
yes, yeah.
And in that, I wonder if that's sort of example of this idea that of course the thought is occurring to you, but
yeah.
you're worried that you're not the genuine author of it.
Yeah, well, I think that can really happen, that, we're having a philosophical discussion, and you have a great idea, and you make this devastating point, and afterwards I'm recalling the discussion, and I say, oh yeah, I had a great idea in that discussion. Well, I do this the whole time. And then you go back and you think, wait a minute, was that actually mine? Yeah, or maybe you don't do that. And, the thing is, it's not that particular thought came from someone. My having that type of thought was made to happen by you, yeah. But the particular one didn't get pushed in there by you. Yeah, what you're describing is kind of ordinary communication. In a way, you're describing a case in which you manipulate people, but of course, just in an ordinary conversation. That's what you hope is going to happen. You say to people, I think Obama's taking completely the wrong direction, or whatever it is you think. And you say, and what you hope is that they're going to agree with you and have those very thoughts. You see what I mean? Because you said that. That's normal. That's fine. That's not this thing. Where it's the individual concrete thought that's being pushed into someone else's head. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about the contrast because it might be easy to have, when we look at these incredibly strange phenomena that are so alien to us as
Yeah.
non-schizophrenic patients, you might think, well, the contrast is, I understand that all my thoughts are authored by me, and what's going wrong here is that I'm misattributing authorship. The delusion is, instead of saying, I'm the author of my thoughts, I'm saying somebody else is the author of my thoughts. But I'm wondering if there's room for a different kind of contrast, too.
Yeah.
So you might think, no, it's not the normal case that I'm always thinking of myself as the author of my thoughts, because I often think of thoughts as popping into my head, or as unbidden,
Right.
or as me being like a passive recipient of some thought, or being like
Yeah.
surprised that I would have such a terrible thought.
Yeah, you can be struck by a thought. That's what you say. I was walking along and I was struck by the thought. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe the contrast isn't so much like, well, I always think of having some author, and here I'm just saying
Yeah.
the wrong author. No, maybe these patients are actually giving them an author where we wouldn't give them any kind of particular author. We just say, oh, that happened to me. It occurred to me. Right? It
Yeah.
popped into my head that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting phenomenon, being struck by a thought. And I don't really know how you explain it, that feeling. We'll come on in a minute to mechanisms, as someone was saying, that Frith described. But, okay, let's see how it works. Anything else? Okay. So anyway, Jasper's point about this kind of thing is that you can't follow the emergence of the delusion genetically by empathy. Someone said to me, look, the way I think of it is, it's like if you're listening to a radio station, and suddenly a signal from another radio station cuts in, and you get this thing coming from somewhere else that has just no connection with what was going on before. It just cut in out of the blue. If that's what's going on in someone's mind, you can't get yourself into it, what was happening there. You can't understand how that arose from what was going on before. Yeah. Another thing is, it's important to have a sense of reality about this. That you might think, well, in a hazy kind of way, of course I can imagine that. I can kind of tell a story where this happens, and I can follow the English when you just tell that story. But it's the phenomenon of actually seeing someone right in front of you doing that, saying this thought is cutting in. These thoughts are being pushed into my head. And that's what I think people just find, I can't get the trajectory there. I can't understand that genetically by empathy. Now, the natural scientific thing to do is to say, these people have got something wrong with their brains. And in a general way, of course, that's right. They must have something wrong with their brains. But suppose you find that there are populations of dopamine neurons that are functioning quite differently in those patients to the way they function in anyone else. And you say, well, what's happening there is the irregular firing of dopamine neurons that causes this kind of experience, this experience of alien thoughts. And you could maybe even test this. Maybe you could just disrupt temporarily the firing of someone's dopamine neurons and say, hey, look, now we're getting this experience. And the subject reports that experience. But Frith says, look, even if that was what was going on, even if you found that the irregular firing of dopamine neurons was what was it was implicated in that way, correlated with causing the experience of thought insertion, that wouldn't explain what was going on. That's a really striking claim, right? Even if you found that the irregular firing of dopamine neurons could make it happen or not make it happen, you still wouldn't have explained what was going on. Do you see what he means? What he means is, what would the dopamine neurons be doing there? You want to know why that should be making that happen. It seems unintelligible if you're just given that kind of explanation. Well, yeah. Why isn't that good enough? Yeah, that's what's so striking about this remark, right? What more do you want? Yeah, that's your point. Yeah. After all, isn't an explanation just a list of the causes of a thing? Yeah. It's struck me for years, this thing about Frith. It's a great remark, I think. But his point is there's a kind of brute unintelligibility about it. Let me try this analogy on you. I think what he means is this. Suppose you're the CEO of Apple, and you're looking at your sales figures, and you find, hey, they drop every now and then. Sales of this just drop, and someone tells you, well, we've got a particular facility in North Carolina, and whenever people are sick or laid off there, our sales drop. Yep. Well, you wouldn't say, that explains it. I was wondering what was going on, right? Now, all we need to know is that it's when that facility is undermanned, that's when our sales drop. Yeah. That wouldn't be enough, right? You wouldn't say, well, now we understand the whole story. What you say is, well, what do they do at that facility? Is this marketing? Is it perhaps production? Is it shipping? What do they do at this thing? Is it mailing? What's going on? Is it manufacturing? You see what I mean? That's what you'd need. So I think the first idea is, if you're just told this population of dopamine neurons is causing this, the next question is, well, what were they doing, those neurons? Chemical reaction. Well, I think the key word here is, okay, let's see. Class, what is the key word here? Okay, it begins with an F. And the second letter is U. Functionalism, yes, right. What I think Frith is looking for here is a functional explanation of what these neurons were doing in the system. You see what I mean? So there's a functional explanation, and then there's the neurons that are implementing that function. He wants some box and arrow diagram. He wants something with an S1 having a motor input, having an input. What were our inputs? I1 giving way to a motor output. M2, yeah. You want to know what the neurons are doing. Like that's the thing about the apple plant. It's not just that these particular people are affecting the cells. It's that you want to know what they're doing in the whole organization. It is a biological question, but it's a very high-level biological question. It's not a question at the level of chemistry. It's a question at the level of what's going on. Like if you're told the function of the heart is to pump blood, that's not itself, that's part of biology, but it's not itself a statement about the chemistry of the heart. Yeah, it tells you what the heart does in the whole system. Yeah, it doesn't tell you what the heart's made of. Yeah, so he's saying if you say it's irregular firing of dopamine neurons, if you're told fluctuations in the heart muscle, perturbations of the heart muscle make people get very sick, well, that's fine. But if you don't know that the function of the heart is to pump blood, you still haven't really understood what's going on. Yeah, it's because the blood pumping has been affected that the person is getting sick. Yep. The function of it is there are lots of dopamine neurons in the brain. Yeah, it's not just one system. I'm sure you're right. There are dopamine systems involved in pattern recognition. I think that's not quite what Frith has in mind here, but yeah. We'd have to go back to experience. Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is. I think that's very interesting. Yeah. Okay. We'll come on to that. Yeah, it's a big question, that, because remember we had all this stuff about how do functional characterizations of human beings connect to experience, and that was the point about the inverted spectrum. You have two people with your spectrum could be an inversion of mine, but you can be functionally just the same as me. So you can't just read off from someone's functional organization what experiences they're having. But what we're going to try to get here is an explanation of someone's experiences in terms of their functional organization. Okay, here's a simple question. Suppose you move your arm, right? You can try this right now. Or suppose someone pushes your arm. Suppose the person sitting behind you shoves your arm. Your arm might move in exactly the same way if someone else shoves it, as if you move it yourself. That's all right? Try this now. But It's kind of obvious to you which is going on. If you move your own arm, you know that you were the one that moved it, not someone else. If someone pushes your arm, it's immediately obvious to you that someone pushed your arm, right? That's okay. But the question is, how do you know that how do you do that? How can you tell? If you're just looking at your arm, it seems exactly the same. So how do you know when your arm goes like that? How do you know whether it was a push or whether you did it yourself? That's kind of weird, right? I mean, after all, what's going on is your brain is issuing motor instructions to generate the bodily movement. Then you see the bodily movement, and then you say, hey, I did that. But how do you know that you did that as opposed to someone pushing you? Is it just a kind of hypothesis? Well, this is a nice civilized place. People won't push my arm. 1, 2, yep. You can feel them. Yeah. Let's suppose your arm is anesthetized. Suppose you're wearing some particularly thick coat or something, so you don't actually feel the push in your arm. Yeah. But even if you don't have that, you would still know if someone just grabbed your arm as you were moving it up, as opposed to them giving the momentum to the arm. Yeah. Yeah. We're the ones that use the energy. That's right. Yes, right. Yeah. Yeah, but part of the thing about the arm movement is it doesn't use much energy, right? I mean, I agree that if you were all tired out after it, well, actually, wait a minute. Well, it depends. It depends exactly what the other person is doing. But it might be that if you were all tired out after doing it, you thought, hey, I did that. Well done, me. But in the case of an arm movement, it's such a tiny expenditure of energy. Yeah? You're monitoring your activity. Yeah. 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 I agree you're monitoring your activity, that's right. But the question is, what form does that monitoring take? Because if it's just looking, if the monitoring here just means looking, then what you're seeing is pretty much the same in either case. Yeah? It's like yes, if you intended it. Yeah. So the thing is, just intention on its own won't do it, because the motor instruction here is like your intention. Yeah? So if you intended the bodily movement, well, that's fine. But then the question is, how do you know about your intentions? Yeah, there's nothing there that is getting your intentions. So Frith's picture is, when you generate a movement, this is not just Frith, this is lots of people. This is a classic idea in biology going back about 60, 70 years now. When you send an instruction to one of your limbs to move, you also send off a copy of that instruction to central monitoring. So you've got a bit in your brain, central monitoring. When you look at your arm movement, then you say to central monitoring, hey, my arm moved. Now, the central monitoring, they say, hey, was that one of ours? And if they find there a copy of the instruction to make that arm movement, then it will feel to you like that was your arm movement. You see what I mean? You see how that would work? It's like if you've got a big company, if you're going to buy something from a store, you send something else to central office saying, I'm going to buy something. Yeah, then at central office, when they get the request from the store, they say, oh yeah, that's one of ours, that's one of our orders. So you don't just send off the instruction, you send off a copy of the instruction. And then the way it works is that at central monitoring, they say, yeah, that was one of ours. That seems kind of abstract, but actually that's really key to being able to act in a well-coordinated way. Just as you sit here, your eyes are moving the whole time. So you've got a problem as to when is it that a change in the visual scene is because of your head moving. If you move your head like this, it doesn't at all seem like the whole room is shunting left or right. So how do you know that's what's going on? How do you know that when you do that, this is your head moving and not the room moving? Well, only because back at central monitoring, they're saying, oh yeah, there was a head movement planned there. So that movement of the whole room there, that wasn't the room moving, that was just the head moving. Or if people are equipped with prisms, if they make you wear prisms that shift everything a few inches to the left, then people are very clumsy at first. But within a couple of days, they learn to operate perfectly well. So you learn how to calibrate your own actions using a system like this, that you issue an instruction. Over at central monitoring, you can compare that instruction to what actually happened. And you can say, oh no, I moved too far to the left there, or I moved too far to the right. And you can correct your actions because at central monitoring, they're feeding back and saying, next time, move it a bit more to the left. And that's, I guess, is what happens when you're growing up. Your body size is changing the whole time. You have to keep recalibrating. You go through phases of being clumsy. And it's this system that is letting you keep your movements calibrated. But now, suppose something went wrong with that mailing system that sends off a copy of the instruction to move the arm. What would happen then? Yeah? It feels like you're what? You're not in control. Yeah. Because what's going to be happening is that you move your arm. You intend to move your arm all right. You do move your arm. The arm moves, but it doesn't feel like it's you that initiated it, because you don't have that copy of the instruction back at central monitoring. And that is another symptom of schizophrenia, that sense of possession. You're making mistakes about who's causing the bodily movements. That's particularly common for speech. So here's a typical report from a patient. The force moved my lips. I began to speak. The words were made for me. You're the one that's initiating the speech. There's nobody else around doing that. But this complex vocal activity, it doesn't feel like you initiated it because you're not getting that copy of the instruction at central monitoring. A 29-year-old shorthand typist described her actions as follows. When I reach my hand for the comb, it is my hand and arm which move, and my fingers pick up the pen, but I don't control them. I sit there wanting them to move, and they are quite independent. What they do is nothing to do with me. I am just a puppet who is manipulated by cosmic strings. When the strings are pulled, my body moves, and I can't prevent it. So could we give an explanation like that for that feeling of having thoughts pushed into your head? So this is the structure here. We've got the motor instruction to perform the movement. You mail off a copy of the motor instruction. And then back at central monitoring, this is what was meant by that stamping mechanism. If there's match at the monitor of the limb movement and the instruction, you say, that was one of mine. If there isn't match, you say, someone else made me do that. So the way it would go there is, you have a motor instruction to think a conscious thought. You find you look inside your mind, you say, hey, there's that conscious thought. Kill God. You say, did I think that? Well, you look over at central monitoring. Did I get a copy of the instruction to think that thought? Well, for a schizophrenic, that mailing system is not working. So it's going to feel Like someone else took possession of your mind, pushed that thought into your head. You didn't make it. Yep. Do they have freedom of will? Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Yeah. The situation is so strange. I mean, these are not like drug addicts or something. Yeah, it's partly, as I said earlier, this is so destabilizing of your ordinary picture of the world that it's very hard to have freedom in the sense that you don't really know what's going on. But there's another thing, which is, are these patients irrational? If you're irrational, then you don't have freedom of will. If you're not capable of reason, then you don't have freedom of will. Are these patients capable of reasoning? And on the one hand, they just got something wrong with their brain, and they're doing their best to make sense of the situation. But what they've moved into is a world that is so alien to the ordinary common sense world that it's very hard to know what the rules are. And take this patient that we started with who had thoughts being carried by drops from her mother's unconscious onto the air conditioner, and then with a crack being passed into her own conscious mind. How could you reason with that patient? Could you say, well, it's not really the air conditioner that does it. If you think about it, it's the lamp or the electrical sockets. I mean, how would you display rationality? Such a basic part of your thinking about our ordinary world has gone away that you have no idea what is rational to think. If people can push thoughts into your head, then what else is possible? What reasonably follows from that? What kind of world are you in? I think it's very hard to say that such a patient is rational, because you really are in a world where you don't know what the moves are. In a way, it's not their fault, because they may be completely rational to begin with, but given such unusual experiences, what to make of what is happening is very, very difficult. Yep.
Can you say a little bit about what the analogy or the analog of the ordering would be?
Right. Well, you think, you sit down, you say, in the morning, you say, I'm going to write an essay about free will, right? And you have this plan, I'm going to have some thoughts about free will.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
I'm going to think free will is not possible.
So it's like a subject-directed intention. Like I'm going to have thoughts at this time.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
Exactly.
when they match the time.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, that's straightforward enough, right? Is that straightforward enough? The first time I heard this, I thought I never heard anything so daft. I mean, because for just the reason, the thing you're just touching on. Sorry, Umra. Okay. I mean, how can you be having your thoughts as a result of a planned process? I mean, my thinking, I'm the CEO, I'm in charge, I do the thinking, right? If this picture is right, then surely the schizophrenic is actually correct, because you're not in charge of what thoughts you have. Something else, your brain or something, is making you have those thoughts. I guess that's behind the free will thing too. If that's what's going on, then you're deeply not in charge. Umra?
I was just wondering how much success there is at schizophrenic patients being able to rationally control.
Yes.
Since they get one seed to tell them
Yeah.
why.
My impression is it's about 10 years since I looked at this seriously, since I was up to date on it. But my impression is that the results are very patchy. That is much more popular in Britain, I think, than here to have CBT for schizophrenia, where you ask patients to do exercises like if you think he's pushing thoughts into your head, or if you think, to take another delusion that patients have, your thoughts are being broadcast, then test it out. See how it happens. And patients will, in the short term, say, yeah, I tested it out and you're quite right. That's not what's going on. But they tend to relapse. Yeah. So it's, you don't get there's not a clear-cut thing there. It helps trying to give patients insight, but it seems to be pretty short-term and pretty patchy in who does well with it. I mean, the thing is, the bit of your brain that lets you be rational, that's what's gone. Yeah. I mean, I began by asking, why would you have such a mechanism anyway to let you know which thoughts are yours and which aren't? I mean, one possibility would be maybe back in the Stone Age, people got into the habit of pushing thoughts into each other's minds. I mean, maybe if your village was being attacked by people from the next village, they would push thoughts into your heads to your great detriment, so you desperately needed something to tell you, no, that's an alien thought. Yeah, and so we evolved to do that. That seems pretty unlikely. But then if you don't need a defense mechanism like that, then why would you have a stamper? Why do you need something to differentiate your thoughts from someone else's? That can't be what this is for. Well, I think a natural hypothesis, this was Feinberg's hypothesis, one of the inventors of this, is to keep your thoughts on track. Now, suppose you're trying to write an essay. One of the funny things about thinking is it's so difficult, right? I mean, that's not, it's not just me, right? You sit down in the morning, you say, this morning I'm definitely going to write that essay. You're well fed, you're well rested, you've got everything you need right before you, the room is just at the right temperature. You stare out the window, you think about anything except the thing you're meant to be thinking about, right? That's not, isn't it? That's my mornings. That's normal. Thinking is really hard. Keeping your thoughts on track is really hard. So you might think of this as part of the problem there, that this is a kind of mechanism to keep your thinking on track. And you know, when you're talking, then sometimes you bite your lip, you cut yourself off, you start to swear or something, and I start to swear or something, and you stop yourself before you've really got through the word. It's not that you had to listen to yourself and say, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. That can happen too, that you watch it. But sometimes you're stopping the speech before it's even been said. And presumably what's happening there is that over at Central Monitoring, they're getting a copy of your plan. That's what I'm going to say. And at Central Monitoring, they're saying, for God's sake, stop. Don't do it, right? So if I'm trying to think straight about some problem, then I could be I'm generating all these thoughts. And over at Central Monitoring, they're saying, wait a minute, that's a thought about Sally. Don't think about Sally. You know that always makes you upset. And trying to regulate thinking. There must be we must have a way of regulating thinking. Because after all, these essays do get written. You know, eventually we do manage it. It's hard to regulate your thinking. But we do regulate our thinking. And frankly, you guys wouldn't be here at all unless you had extremely well-regulated thinking, however hard it is. So just to see what I mean by not well-regulated thinking, here's a normal speaker. Attempt to describe one of 4 colored discs. The normal speaker says, well, that's the lightest of the greens. The others become blue, like the ocean or the sea. Here's a schizophrenic speaker addressing the same question. Clean green, the one without the cream. Don't see this color on planes. It looks like moss. Boss. The schizophrenic speech has this kind of surreal, free associating kind of quality. With time and years, the individual becomes so lazy in public life that he is not even capable of writing anymore. On such a sheet of paper, one can squeeze many letters if one is careful not to transgress by one square shore. In such fine weather, one should be able to take a walk in the woods. Naturally, not alone, but with a girl. At the end of the year, one always renders the annual accounting. The sun is now in the sky, yet it is not yet 10 o'clock. I mean, People sometimes say to me, I don't really see where you're going with that idea, John. But this guy, I mean, there is no trajectory at all, right? I mean, you can't. It's not that you can't really see where he's going with it. It's just so clear. There's no question of a destination. That's called formal thought disorder. You have that kind of thing. This is completely deregulated thinking, yet there is nothing monitoring that at all. So a suggestion is that what's going on with a schizophrenic is that system for keeping your thinking on track, that's what's failing. That's what's responsible for this formal thought disorder, and that's also what's generating the sensation of having alien thoughts inserted into you. So, from the point of view of our class, part of the reason I go through this is, what kind of diagram is this, class? It begins with an F. It is a functionalist. Are there boxes and arrows in this diagram? Yes, there are boxes and arrows in this diagram. It is a functionalist diagram, right? Is this telling us something about the conscious experiences of the subject? Well, one interesting thing about it is that it is. It's also telling us something about the dopamine neurons. It's telling us what the dopamine neurons were doing. They were firing off these copies of the motor instructions. Yeah? So this is a way in which science could illuminate experience. You have these patients who have these very strange conscious lives, and the scientific functional account is telling you something about why. The thing is, does that make this something that you can understand genetically by empathy? Now, at some level, we do understand what's going on, but I think you still don't really get in there and understand genetically by empathy where the alien thoughts are coming from, because the patient themselves feels that this is something ununderstandable. Part of the experience is that this is just something incomprehensible happening to you. A different case is with salience neurons. There are other populations of dopamine neurons whose function seems to be to tell you, hey, look out, look over there. And what happens with some patients is that these neuron systems go into overdrive. So what you've got is a whole bunch of alarm bells going off just as you look around. There's a classic case of a patient who looked at a row of empty marble tables in a café and became convinced that the world was coming to an end. And when you just read that, you think, well, I have no idea what was going on there. But when you get the neural explanation and you say, maybe their salience neurons were going into overdrive then. So in effect, you're looking at this innocent scene, and inside, every alarm bell in your body is going off. Then that wouldn't be an unnatural thing to think. On that note, we'll pack it up for the term. We've gone through a lot this term, and you guys have been, what should I say? You have shown a great deal of stamina and a great deal of character in going through all this. And some of our exchanges have just taken my breath away in the questions that people asked.